Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, my name's Ashton G. Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. We got a weird one today. This is my third podcast in less than, I would dare say, 12 hours. Not even 24 hours. So I recorded 2 episodes of the Challenge Notebook, which is a podcast where I specifically talk about the Challenge, a reality TV show that I've grown way too fond of, to be honest with you. It tickles my mind in ways that many sports do not on a multitude of ways. But I have a lot of fun watching it, and so I just decided instead of spouting out my ideas on Twitter, I might as well condense them and put them in one area and potentially get a couple views out of them as a result. So I recorded 2 episodes of that, didn't go to sleep until like 5 or 4 in the morning or something like that, had to wake up at 7 in the morning to do a thing, and yeah, life is a little bit better at the end of this day, but it was pure chaos simply because I recorded 2 podcasts back to back in the morning, and banked on being able to maintain my sanity. By the way, if you throughout the next couple episodes, you're gonna be seeing some new gear. Your boy swagged out. I saw some Nike stuff that was Seahawks related that I wanted to use and get and everything like that, and so it happened for me. Anyway, it's specifically Seahawks stuff. I'm still on the hunt for those Nike Pro Breathe shirts. So if you are a person that knows where to find either a Houston Texans one or a Seattle Seahawks Nike Pro Breathe shirt that the actual NFL players wear, but for some reason they don't sell in stores to regular people unless you go to like specific places like the clearance store, or I've seen some in Ross before. It's kind of weird. Anyway, I need to get this podcast done so I can get my weekend started. We are going to do 2 things today. We're going to review everything that happened in week 8, and we are going to do predictions for week 9. You guessed it. This is going to be pretty simple. We're going to cut all the glitz and the glamour and all the fancy stuff. I did a bunch of that on the last podcast, and I'm trying to get back on schedule. I'm putting the stuff out that I got to put out, and working on how to promo stuff and everything like that. But I feel like I've been kicking ass lately, man. Anyway, Thursday Night Football happened, which guess what? Like, nobody cares. It was kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie. We're gonna talk about it when we start talking about Week 9. It's the first game for Week 9. Learned a lot about a couple of players, and learned a lot about the Steelers and the Titans. Mostly good things for both of those teams. Still wondering how some people have their job. Anyway, let's take it from the top. You guys know the drill. We have the 4 different categories that we sort games into, and as we go through them, we'll talk about what each category means. If this is your first time being here, I need to get this free promo out of here. Sorry, don't forget to stay hydrated, kids, and adults. Mostly, actually, more adults than kids. The dangers of dehydration are, 1, more prevalent in adults because it's the weekend, and then 2, the consequences are much higher for adults than they are for kids. Anyway, let's start off from the top. Let's talk about the games that sucked ass. Anyway, as you can tell, there's way too many games on this list, so if you can't read it on YouTube, don't worry. Your boy's going to go through each and every single one of them. I'm going to talk about why I had an absolutely terrible time watching them. So taking it from the top, the Patriots played the Dolphins. The Patriots are coming off of a pretty impressive win over the Buffalo Bills. It was one of those some people will call it a dead cat bounce. I think it's just the simple fact that when divisional opponents play each other, a lot of stuff gets kind of jumbled up. The familiarity with opponents is difficult, and you start having to rely on unique playmaking. And if you don't have a lot of that, which the Bills' playmaking, I would say, is fluctuated drastically throughout the course of this season, right? The playmaking has gone too far sometimes, and if you don't know what I mean by that, I'll explain it in the sense that a lot of people just want Josh Allen to stop running the ball, right? Like, they want Josh Allen to stop trying to be the hero and all this kind of stuff like that. I don't think he should. When you're always an X, like, you can't tell somebody to like stop being an X factor. Now, you can pick your spots and be more efficient about being an X factor. Yes, I agree with that. But telling somebody to cut off the fountain and cut off the narcotic instantaneously, that's madness. That's taking away an aspect of your game that other teams in the NFL don't have, and you're removing it from your offense, and thus weakening your team, especially a team that has been ravaged. And I say ravaged because I like being dramatic, ravaged by injury so far. Offensive line play's been a little up and down. That could be a testament to the quarterback play as well. As time goes on, I'm sure the adjustment will happen, but facts are right now, they really only can depend on like Stephon Diggs. And that's the major problem. Like, they're only really dependent upon Stephon Diggs. Dawson Knox is going on an IR. I think he broke his wrist. And now it's time for Dalton Kincaid, the guy who was the talk of the town during the NFL draft, coming up big. I like how Dawson Knox definitely stood up and responded when the Bills not only drafted a guy who was supposed to be his replacement, but a guy that they thought was better than him off rip, right? Dalton Kincaid was drafted pretty high, and Dawson Knox stood up and said, "Oh no, you must have forgot who I am and what my name is, what I'm about." Anyway, the Dolphins curb stomped the Patriots, mainly because the Patriots offense on a good day is capping out at like 24 points. And jeez, man, this is one of those moments where the Dolphins took advantage of a team that didn't have an offensive pace that could keep up with them. It's not to say that they just ripped and ran up the field or whatever. It was shocking to see a team that I thought would play this game a lot closer just because of Bill Belichick. But fact of the matter is that there's one quarterback that's got Bill Belichick's number, is Tua Tagovailoa, and that means Mike McDaniels as a head coach as well. So even though Tua was beating Bill with not Vance Joseph. Wow, I got my black guys mixed up. Nobody heard that. Tua beat Bill before Mike got there. Anyway, now that they're on like a totally different level when it comes to offensive gameplay, it's too much of it's like trying to stop a tsunami with a sandcastle. It's just not going to happen, and that's what happened in this one. They pulled away from them. They scored a touchdown at every single one of these quarters, and the Patriots defense that we've heard so much about, they are holding on for dear life. They've had some really, really impressive showings throughout the course of this season, but this was one of those games where, you got to have help on the offensive side, right? Like, they got to find some help. Once again, terrible run game performance from the Patriots up front, and it's like, Ramondre Stevenson, really good running back. And the other aspect of it is like a lot of us believe that Zeke in spurts is really good as a football player. He can't be in terms of, like, a lot of people are not going to sit here and break their necks and say, like, this is the guy whenever we want him to be or whenever we put him out there. He's good in situational football as of right now. Now that, who knows, man? It seems like he's lost a lot of his explosion. That comes with time. Everybody eventually loses their ability to explode at literally the level that the number, 1% of the 1% of athletes on the planet do. Who would have thought? Some of us never even get to the 1%, so let alone, like, talking about losing explosion. But yeah, a touchdown in every quarter is just a pace that the offense for the Patriots cannot keep up with, and I did not need this game to find that out. So yeah, that was kind of a foregone conclusion. I thought it was going to be more competitive, honestly. 31-17 is pretty bad. Jets played the Giants. So let's talk about the most deceptive game of the entire week. This one I did like a really long breakdown about, and it was because I watched it and every single second hurt me so much in my entire life. So let's do it. The second play of this game, the Giants smacked the fuck out of Zach Wilson, like on a sack, which is kind of a precursor to a lot of stuff that happens throughout the course of this game. In case you wanted a hint of how today was going to go, the play immediately after, Kayvon Thibodeau murders Zach Wilson again and forces a fumble, and the Giants recover. That's the second play of this game, right? I'm sorry, that's the third play, because there's the kickoff, the return, there's the snap for a sack, and then there's the second snap for the fumble recovered by Kayvon Thibodeau. 3 plays into the fucking game. 3 plays, right? Anyway, the Jets get lucky. Jalen Hyde doesn't catch a relatively easy touchdown after the Giants, 1, get really great starting field position, and then 2, get pretty close to the end zone. Now comes the part where the game sucked so hard. This is the part where I read off all the sad things that happened throughout the course of this game. So let me get it out. Remember how I talked about the poor decision to only believe in one running back as the system? We were talking about how Dalvin Cook wanted to be traded away and how I felt like they needed to mix it up a little bit. Even if they don't want Dalvin Cook to be like the number one guy in terms of carries, they need to mix it up between him and Breece Hall, just because you never know what's going to happen to Breece Hall on any given day. Yes, he's a superstar running back, and I'm glad that we can have a team that truly believes in one guy and gives him all the power in the world to go out there and ball the fuck out. But there's games like this where, by the way, there's rain going on throughout the course of this game, right? The Jets had more penalty yardage than rush yards in this game. The Jets had the same number of turnovers as they did third down conversions, which was 2, but don't worry, they gave up twice as many sacks throughout the course of the game, which was 4. The Jets had 17 possessions. 15 of those 17 possessions were 5 plays or less. So a 3-and-out, 2 downs turnover, right? A 3-and-out, 2 downs, punt the ball away, and or less than 6. And 6 of those 15 were also 3-and-outs. So there were 5 that were there were 15 of those possessions that were 5 plays or less, and then 6 of those 15 were 3-and-outs. That's a potent offense right there. They had 2 one-play drives. And this is like the, easy come, easy go kind of situation. The football gods give it, then they take it away. One was a sick touchdown from Breece Hall off of a check down. So technically it's pass yards for Zach Wilson, who I got to get the exact number, because if you take away the number, I think he got under 100 passing yards in total in this game. When you take away the Breece Hall touchdown run. Anyway, Breece Hall touchdown run, I think it was 50 yards. And then the other one was a Breece Hall fumble. So they had 2 one-play drives. One was a touchdown, one was a fumble. Feels like the most football thing possible, right? Where it's like there's only a certain amount of bad things that can really happen in this one. So going back to what I was talking about before. Hold on. By the way, pretty much every other pass was also a check down. So Zach Wilson had 240 pass yards. And I'm trying to find that Breece Hall touchdown. Ooh, man. I wonder if you guys hear that when... So if you take 50 away, he had under 100 yards. So that was a 50-yard touchdown run from Breece Hall for the Jets, which would turn out to be, I believe, their only touchdown of the entire regulation portion of the game. Yeah, you heard what I said. Regulation portion of the game. But yeah, the other, like I said before, 2 one-play drives. One was a fumble. One was a cool 50-yard touchdown. Weird shit that happened in this one. Saquon has Quinnen Williams on his back, and he tries to pull a spin move, and he swings Quinnen Williams, the 300-plus pound defensive tackle for the New York Jets, who is mostly muscle, in a full circle to break the tackle. And then if it were not for the fact that 4 other Jets players were directly behind Quinnen, Saquon probably would have got away with that. And it's just another example of like Saquon Barkley is fucking ridiculous. Tyrod Taylor catches his own pass after the ball slipped out of his hand while he was running to the right-hand side. It was raining the entirety of this game. It slips out of his hand. He then gets crushed and leaves the game for the rest of the game. He had a chest injury, probably because he landed on top of the ball. The Jets get knocked down to their third-string center in the course of this game, and the first snap isn't exactly perfect, and it becomes a fumble recovered by the Giants. So, yeah, Zach Wilson, I guess you could say Zach Wilson dropped it. Basically, the center snapped the ball, and it went to his left ass cheek, and only his left ass cheek instead of, like, down the middle. So, Zach was, like, trying to pull the ball backwards, because a lot of people think that an under center snap is one of those situations where it's like ball goes into taint area, quarterback grabs taint, pulls ball backwards, steps back. All that happens at the same time. So if the timing of the snap is too slow or too fast, when the quarterback closes his hands, the ball is not there. And so when they pull back instantaneously to try and hand the ball off or get ready to pass, it just doesn't work, right? Anyway, the first snap of the third-string center in this game is a fumble recovered by the Giants instantaneously because all the ball went to his left ass cheek. Naming names. In this game, this is our naming names segment where we talk about like a random player who did something cool this week and that you probably just never heard of. This guy, the guy who recovered the fumble for the Giants, his name was Micah McFadden. He played football at Indiana, but he's originally from Florida. He's a white guy, by the way. Originally from Florida, he went to Plant high school. Don't know who it's named after. And he also apparently went to the same high school that Christian Watson, the wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, and Andrew Beck, who some of you may be familiar with because he's the fullback for the Texans that ran back a kickoff for a touchdown in like week 2 or something like that. He was the lowest rated player in his Indiana University football recruitment class, and there's an article that I read that basically was like, yeah, man, he probably wouldn't have even gone to Indiana, which I think was his only Division I offer, because they think the only reason that Micah McFadden even got scouted is because one of his teammates was the son of the at the time head coach of Indiana University. And that's the only reason they think that he got an offer. That was an article that I read. Anyway, he went from like the lowest rated dude in his recruitment class to the starting middle linebacker for Indiana within like the course of one spring training camp. So yeah, he's pretty good. He knows exactly what he's doing. I thought that was kind of cool. He looks like he's a little undersized is the way to phrase it. He ran like a 4.6 40, which for a linebacker is like decent, right? It's on the quote-unquote slower end or whatever, but we all know that football is about angles, not necessarily about raw, straight-ahead speed for the most part. And his 3-cone time, pretty good, which is more important than being able to run in a straight line really fast when you're a linebacker. Once again, don't forget the 40-yard dash is originally designed to test how fast a person can be on special teams, because the 40 yards is like a calculated average of the distance run. I don't know why that came up while I was typing that. The distance run by a player on any given special teams play, the average distance run is like 40 yards. Some dude calculated that like a long time ago. And if you can't play special teams back in the day, and really even now, if you can't play special teams, like what use are you unless you become like an immediate starter on offense or on defense, right? It's just one of those things to think about. There were 15 punts in the first half of this game, which I'm sure was super fun for what sounded like a way too packed MetLife Stadium. Way too many people there. It was filled with Giants fans, by the way. It was too loud. Like, you go back, you listen to that game, there's no way there should be that many people there to watch the Giants and the Jets play, even if they are both the hometown teams and stuff like that, which a lot of people argue the Jets are not the hometown team because of where MetLife is located. I don't want to get into that or whatever, but if you're a Giants fan, put it in the comments. Do you like where MetLife is? If you're a Jets fan, I don't need to know. I know pretty much every Jets fan hates where MetLife is in real life. Anyway, most people do because it's like essentially on an island, if I'm not mistaken, and it's like a nightmare getting in and out of there, whatever. As a person who lives in Houston, Texas, and the stadium for the Texans is literally right off the freeway, it's a nightmare. It's also in an area where there's constant construction on the freeway that is nearest to NRG Stadium or NRG Arena. It's fucking terrible. Anyway, whatever. And then they use cops, and sometimes the cops actually make the traffic significantly worse. Who would have thought? Anyway, the Giants get their one good drive because if you're an NFL football franchise and you're down to your third-string quarterback, at some point you're going to get one good drive out of people who are supposed to be, who are indefinitely elite-level athletes, which, by the way, should be a testament to you as a fan at home. If you think that this whole like football thing is like, oh, these third-string dudes are just a bunch of scrubs and you can kind of take their spot like they're interchangeable type dudes, Tommy DeVito is like an elite-level athlete who, by the way, Tommy DeVito is the third-string quarterback for the Giants, in case you didn't know. He actually got signed officially after this game, and I'm pretty sure Tommy is the he's got signed on he was on the practice squad, gets elevated, and I think he's like technically the first usage of that emergency quarterback rule that they instituted specifically because the 49ers literally ran out of quarterbacks to have on a day, on one of their game days or whatever, and they were like, well, we can't have that happening in the playoffs for an NFL team, so we need to find a way for an extra quarterback to be on the sideline but not count against the 53-man roster, so you can still have all the players that you need without cutting, like a third-string corner or something, which, by the way, third-string corner, super important, especially when we talk about special teams. Anyway, once again, prime example, punters and kickers on special teams if need be, quarterbacks never on special teams. So they're kind of like non-functioning, like unless you're like the starter, there's no way for you to be like, oh, our second string and our third string quarterback can also fill in at gunner on punter. So, kind of difficult to put once again, if the requirement for quarterbacks was quarterbacks' physical nature was just a little bit higher, maybe things would be a little bit different, and we wouldn't be in this world where if you breathe on them incorrectly, you get a penalty. Anyway, they get a good drive from Tommy DeVito after a super soft personal foul that was called against the Jets for hitting Tommy DeVito. They scooped him up. They were gang tackling DeVito, and he was fighting back against them as they were gang tackling him. And Jermaine Johnson, who's been killing it this season, man. I think he's got like 4.5 sacks or something like that, and we're in week 9, which is ridiculous. Puts him on pace to potentially have a 10-sack season, which is always really good, especially when you play outside linebacker. Jermaine Johnson sees the pile of people still standing up and DeVito still running his feet, and he just jumps he runs and he jumps and takes DeVito down to the ground, and the refs call that a personal foul for roughing the passer, even though DeVito wasn't trying to throw the ball. The Giants score on this drive, and at this point, Tommy DeVito has not completed an NFL pass. At this point of the game, you know what? This is in the third quarter. I'll reveal it. I'll tell you the joke. This is the third quarter. Tommy DeVito and the Giants score on a drive where they do not pass the ball. They once again rely on the guy that they didn't want to pay all that money to, Saquon Barkley, who essentially carried them to this dub, and then the team blew it at the end because they drifted away from the game plan, which was continue to run the ball and find 17 billion different ways to run the ball. Honestly, a little surprised there weren't more ends around, there weren't more triple reverses, all that kind of stuff, and that probably was because there was raining or whatever, but more involvement from the wide receivers would have been really good. As a matter of fact, the Giants attempt 7 passes with Tommy in the course of this game. He completes 2 of 5 straight pass attempts to Saquon Barkley, and that's at the end. No lie, the Giants essentially gave up on running the ball. They gave up on passing the ball and only ran it for basically the midpoint of the second quarter when Tyrod went out to the end of this game going into overtime. Now I know what you're thinking. That's sad as fuck. The Giants offense just disappeared, and they ended the game with -1 passing yards. That's really sad. That's super pathetic. When in actuality, you should be saying, holy shit, it's sad the Jets couldn't stop a team that they knew every single time they snapped the ball was doing one thing and one thing only. They had to go into overtime with this team to be able to beat them. But yeah, whatever. And they beat them by 3. Because they had multiple 4th down penalties throughout the course of this game that ended up with reviving multiple Giants drives. They kept the Giants offense on the field. The Jets didn't convert a 3rd down until their final drive of the 4th quarter. Right? To get a game-tying field goal against the team that was only running the ball with their 3rd-string quarterback in the rain. Yeah. They took their final drive. They kicked the game-winning field goal. And they go into OT. The Jets scored in the first quarter and then didn't score again until 1 second was left on the clock in the fourth quarter to go into overtime. That's what we're talking about here. The Giants blew this game. That's the funny part about all this. The score says 13-10, and you think to yourself, the Jets defense locked it down, when in actuality, there was only one team that was really in a box this entire game, and it was the team that had their starting quarterback, and it was the New York Jets. They got murked. The D-line for the Giants was on fire this entire game. But yeah, the Giants get to, I want to say it's like the 51-yard line or something like that, and it becomes 4th and 1 for them. They attempt a field goal, and I think it was Graham Gano. He misses it, which was his second miss of the day. That turns the ball over to the Jets at the 50 or at the midfield line or whatever, and they drive it down and kick a game-winning field goal. This is the game that confirms the Giants drafted the right guy in Kayvon Thibodeau. He was amazing. Even in games where he did not get, even in the plays that he didn't get sacks, he was getting tackles for losses in the run game. He was in Zach Wilson's right, left pocket. If he got butt pockets, Kayvon Thibodeau was in there. He got his social security number. I know that for sure. But yeah, the Giants offense basically had 2 good possessions throughout the course of this game, and they still blew it to the Jets. The game ends on you guessed it, the fact that Zach Wilson sucks at football. He underthrows a streak route going towards the end zone, and the DB gets called for PI that represents 30 yards, the biggest play of the entire game. After this game, Tommy DeVito gets signed. Leonard Williams gets traded to the Seahawks. It was a fucking nightmare. I feel really bad for the Giants because I felt like they should have won this game. Even though I picked the Giants to win it, I felt like they should have won this game handedly. They performed ridiculously well for the circumstances, and the Jets should be pretty ashamed of themselves for how shitty they played. Like, straight up, they should have lost this, but that's not how reality works. Anyway, like I said, It's super funny that this game ends on Zach Wilson underthrowing his wide receiver and then getting bailed out by the NFL for sucking at his job and drawing a PI penalty, which is the most like quarterback thing of all time. Like, quarterback not good, rules so broken that they make bad quarterback good, despite defensive player playing better than quarterback on any play. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with everybody. I thought it was important. The Bengals played the 49ers, so another snooze fest game in this. I'll save you the time. The beginning of this game was really good. The 49ers were going blow for blow with the Bengals, and then Brock Purdy turned the ball over 3 times throughout the course of the second, third, and fourth quarter, and he eliminated any chance that the 49ers had to win this game. Now, I will point this out. This is really important. Last couple of games we've been kind of harsh on the 49ers defense because they've been looking not like themselves, right? They're a super dominant team up front. Like, we're talking about they make teams struggle as soon as they snap the ball. Now, they did with the Bengals. The thing to take away from this whole situation, the Bengals snapped the ball, and anything that they tried to throw that was beyond 10 yards or took longer than 3 seconds for the person to get separation and the ball to get out did not work the entire game. Now, if you play football like that and you don't turn it over 3 times, you're beating damn near every single team in the NFL, right? That's what the 49ers did. The defense played with a winning formula. The offense kind of threw the game away. Debo's still out. Everybody's clamoring for when he's going to return because it'll be another way to keep the ball out of Brock Purdy's hands while he figures out what's going on. Also, like to point out, seems like Brock Purdy has got a little bit of the Jameis eyes. So I think most of the interceptions, I think he's got like 6 in the past 3 games or something like that, and most of them have been to linebackers. 2 of them, I think, was Cam Bynum versus the Vikings, right? But in this Bengals game, it was Dax Hill and Jermaine Pratt. By the way, the Jermaine Pratt interception was insane / hilarious. Brock Purdy's rolling out. They're inside the Bengals 10-yard line, so they're in field goal range no matter what happens, unless you do the one thing you can't do when you're in scoring range, right? Give the ball to the other team. They roll. Brock Purdy rolls out to the right because he can't find anybody open because the Bengals are just playing lockdown defense like they've been doing most of the season. He rolls to the right-hand side. He's about to run out of bounds. He's looking to try and get the ball, and it's one of those throws where Jawan Jennings is standing on the very edge of the end zone where the white line is at. He's got his toes behind the line, and he's gonna fall forward. And Brock is gonna throw the ball out of bounds technically, but because Jawan catches it with his feet in bounds, it'll count as a touchdown. Instead, Jermaine Pratt throws his hands up in the air and he snatches it out of the air and runs it back. It was pretty sick. Sam Wilson, the other linebacker for the Bengals, also had a sick fake out. He faked like he was running with a wide receiver across the zone. That it was a drag route, like a long drag route from right to left. He faked like he was covering the drag and then came back to cover the in route from the 49ers on the backside of that play, jumped it. Brock Purdy never had a chance, right? Very similar to the stuff that was happening with Cam Bynum, where he was like sent out there just like, hey man, read the plays that are happening in front of you and make the plays in front of you. The linebackers were immaculate. The D line up front, they did a really good job of pass defense. The run defense was the issue. Christian McCaffrey had a really good game despite what happened in the pass game. But facts are, you're going up against the Bengals. The kind of defense that they play, you can't give them 3 free possessions. You can't give them 3 free possessions, bro. That's just, you're going to lose every time you do that. Anyway, Bears-Chargers. This game was on Sunday Night Football. Another snoozer for Sunday Night Football. I want to say the best primetime slot this entire season has probably been Monday Night Football up front, being for real about it. Chargers going here. They kind of run through the Bears like it's not even a contest for a vast majority of it. A lot of people, I guess, are starting to realize that the Chargers like a certain type of guy. It's a tall, fast dude to play wide receiver. Donald Parham Jr. finally gets back into the limelight. Last year, his season ended in kind of a scary fashion, if you recall. He caught a touchdown, and then he fell down in the process of catching the touchdown. He hit his head on the turf, and he just like froze up. Like legitimately, it was as if somebody hit him in the head with a baseball bat, and he was concussed, and his body stiffened up and everything like that. It was really scary to witness. But he came back. Had second best game of his career. Gerald Everett is out. Too bad for everybody else. Donald Parham Jr., for what he lacks in the route running that Gerald Everett brings, he brings in the physical presence that he has on the field. They killed it. Keenan Allen was doing his thing. The defense for the Bears was really struggling out there. They could not, and I'm not sitting here saying the Chargers got like a really good offensive line. They play slightly above average from what I've seen across the league so far, and they couldn't. I mean, the Bears couldn't get any pressure on Justin, and if that's what we're talking about, it's a wrap, right? That it also didn't help that Austin Eckler was back, so they had yet another threat in the pass game, plus Austin's ability to be able to run the ball really well, and the linebacker position. There's some hope for the Bears, but it's not Roquan Smith. So guess what? Austin Eckler had himself one hell of a game in that one. It was pretty decisive early on, especially like when you went into halftime, you knew the Chargers were going to win that game. I will say this, Tyler Bagent, for whatever people have to say, the bloom is off the rose or whatever, he was still trying to throw that ball down the field. A lot of times, backup quarterbacks be out there scared to make mistakes. I don't know if it's the arm wrestling thing or just his mentality and his personality makeup. He was still like, hey man, like we're not going to get on the board throwing these 5-yard passes. He started flinging it down the field and throwing, he started throwing at people who were running the streak routes, even when he knew that they were not open. He was trying to give them a chance to go out there and make a play, which a lot of backup quarterbacks just flat out don't do. So, that's all I got for that one. The Lions play the Raiders, and Josh McDaniels and his whole crew got fired in the middle of the night. I don't even want to talk about the actual game. If you want to go watch the game, you can. It would actually be the worst thing to possibly happen to you probably this week, watching Raiders Lions again if you watched it the first time. But the Lions are back. They were cooking. The Raiders defense has got too much pressure on it, essentially because they are non-existent on offense. So Aiden O'Connell is about to take over. Antonio Pierce, who's the former Giants linebacker. Love to see linebackers out there succeeding. Antonio Pierce was really good when he played, and he's now taking over as the interim head coach. I mean, I want him to do well, but I don't want him to be stuck with the Raiders, but I want him to do really well. I think Delvin Diablo maybe he likes him a lot. Hopefully Delvin turns up this season, continues to turn up this season. But facts are, Antonio Pierce, new head coach. If you didn't hear, Josh McDaniels, the whiz kid, the wonder kid that they like to call people, former guru, former offensive tactical mastermind, probably one of the greatest scammers in the history of the NFL, right next to who's the guy who is the president of team operations for the Texans? Jack Easterby. Right next to Jack Easterby, Josh McDaniels. Photos right next to each other. He'll be back in New England probably by the end of the week. I know that they're already trying to spread rumors that he's coming back, and I really hope that's not the case because I want Bill O'Brien to succeed, and with Josh McDaniels around, that's not going to happen. So, what was I going to say? Oh, I was gonna have a discussion, and since we're in this situation, you tell me in the comments. Getting fired at midnight. I had a conversation with a guy that I used to cover high school sports of. He was a coach for, his name's head coach Edward Jones. He actually works in like player development. Like, man, it's player development in terms of like building systems for players to be successful as like adults and be able to come up with a way for them to succeed by being more organized in life and help them develop their mentality of how to develop in like, a healthy mentality towards football. You should check out his podcast. Edward Jones, Coach Jones, he was really cool to me, man. He played at U of H. He played at Hightower. He played college ball. He coached with Kansas for a little while and a couple other places too. And he had, the news comes out. I don't know if y'all know this or not. If you're not a sports person, I guess I'd tell this story. If you're not a sports person, most people in sports media, they up until like 3, 4 in the morning sometimes. For the most part, they're up until like 3 o'clock in the morning. I used to work as an overnight radio producer, and my job was to book journalists, and I used to think that was an impossible task until I talked to, I want to say Bob Myers from the New York Times, who has covered the covered the Giants for a really long time. He wrote a book about the Patriots, and he told me, he's like, oh no, Ashton, like they're up all night. You don't think people don't write stories during the day, bro? Like they're gathering information during the day. They're writing at night, and they're staying up pretty late. And if you're a night owl person, sports media is for you as like a human being, unless you're like one of those weirdo morning people. Morning people in sports media have to be up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, so it's actually quite insane what their day is like. They're up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're done working by noon, and it sounds. To be honest with you, it sucks. It sucks because it's like you go out with your friends and all that kind of stuff like on the weekends, and if you're like the weekend anchor person, you got to be up at 4 a.m. Like Greeny doesn't have a problem with it because he's like married and got kids and shit like that. His kid's like getting ready to go to college. Him being up at 4 o'clock in the morning is just what he does, right? He's been doing morning radio for a really long time. Morning radio is always tough, bro, because you have to wake up and basically you have to wake up and figure out all the shit that happened while you were asleep. Like if you want to function properly like as a human being in morning radio, you need at least 6 hours of sleep because you got to be the energy in the morning. So you can't show up tired. You can't show up like whispering into the microphone, ASMR style. You got to show up, bring the energy. That's what I call the morning zoo. So they can, it's basically like being caffeine, but without being caffeine, right? Like they're constantly trying to throw all these different segments at you with all these different voices and all these different bits that they're doing every single day. It's a fucking nightmare to work morning shows sometimes, man. Anyway, the secret I was trying to reveal is that reporters are up all times of the night. So when Josh McDaniels got fired, I was like, "Oh, this is funny because there's nobody that's like there's gonna be nobody's at the news desk, right, to approve." Fact check and all this kind of stuff like that. There are people who are newsbreakers in football that were reporting Josh McDaniels got fired. Everybody knew that he really got fired. Like, there's no joke. The first person to report it, I think, was like James Palmer or some shit like that. And we all know that he got fired. Like, it wasn't one of those jokes or anything like that. It was one of those situations where like nobody's at the office. So people are like writing the story about how McDaniels got fired, but it's not going to come out until the morning. And you think about that, and you think about all the times you could get fired as a person. I was talking to Coach Jones on Twitter, and he was like, "Yeah, they probably got him right when he was coming out the film room." And I thought about that, and I'm like, "Man, they let him do like the film prep and stuff like that, and still had him fired." But the benefit is, it's like late at night or whatever. He going home to his wife or whoever, and his kids, and he's got. This is really rare. You get hours where like nobody can really talk about it. Like, this shit was not on SportsCenter until the morning. Like, it wasn't on Get Up it wasn't on ESPN until Get Up went on the air, if I'm not mistaken. I know there's an early morning SportsCenter that's even earlier than Get Up or whatever. I'm sure it was on Sports Talk Radio, but that's like radio guys. Like, radio guys can just read off tweets. That's not reporting a story. So to cause like it happened at midnight. People were probably going crazy in Raiders Twitter and stuff like that, but for the most part, like that, it couldn't trend. It couldn't like trend because it was in the middle of the night. I was in the group chat texting about it, and half the people were asleep. it's just one of those things. Like the regular average person at midnight, they're asleep most of the time in America because they got to wake up, and you got a 9 to 5, you got to be up at 7 a.m. Ain't nobody got time to be up at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning type stuff like that. Anyway, that I thought about that, and I was like, that's actually like kind of a cool time to get fired, because like you can walk into, like, if he wanted to go get food somewhere, because it's Vegas, so like shit's open. If you want to go get food somewhere, like, as far as they concerned, he probably still the coach. Like, they don't know that. They don't know he got fired, right? He can call his wife. They can get stuff ready, being like, hey, look, it's a wrap here. He can call all the guys that are on the staff and be like, hey, man, we got fired. If you weren't at the office, you didn't hear about it. All this kind of stuff like that. They fired everybody. So it's like the head coach, the GM, and I think they fired like the president of team operations too, whatever. Antonio Pierce stepping in, all that kind of shit like that. Who knows if he's going to get like a fair shake at becoming the next head coach. But you'd have to imagine, with the fact that now the Raiders are on the hook for 2 former head coaches, because they're still paying John Gruden, and they're paying McDaniels as well. They probably might just instantaneously elevate him to head coach, because if there's ever a person who is going to, 1, do a really good job as a head coach, and 2, not cost you as much, it's Antonio Pierce. So Antonio made a lot of money when he was a player in the NFL, so he's already got bread. Like, he's coaching because he coaches for the love of the game, right? And I don't know what his full financial situation is. He could have filed for bankruptcy last year, for all I know. But for the most part, like, he already has bread, and he already has like a huge head start. And I don't see why there's like a legit reason why you don't give him a fair shake, right? Like, you made him interim coach. It wasn't like you named him interim coach for a reason, right? So yeah, something to think about. I don't care about what actually happened in the game. Like, this was a mere precursor to what was actually going to happen. There was no question whatsoever that McDaniels was not going to make it through this season. It was week 4 and people were talking about firing him, which is wild to think about, because when he went to Denver, people were praising him like he was the Messiah. And, life comes at you fast, kids. Heartbreaker games. These are the games that broke people's spirit in some way, shape, or form. So we got 2 on here. I got Rams Cowboys. So the Rams Cowboys situation, pretty simple. The Rams cannot pass block again. It's very much Bradley Cooper in The Hangover on top of the mountain in California. Like, it happened again, and they cannot pass. They cannot pass block at all. For the most part, pocket collapses instantaneously. Don't know if you guys know this or not. Matthew Stafford's not a spring chicken. He already had an injury coming into this game, and now it's gotten worse. They had a running back situation that was working out pretty well for him with Kyren Williams, and now that's kind of gone away for a little bit, and they're waiting on. They traded away Van Jefferson for a pick from the Atlanta Falcons, and it's very much like, there's a part of me that wants to see them overcome the fact that the draft is the best way to get talent in the NFL. But then there's another, because I want to see Aaron Donald and everybody else do really well. Like, they found Puka Nacua. That's great. That's great scouting right there, right? Like, they barely have any picks, and they still were able to go out there and find a true number 2, number 1 wide receiver in Puka Nacua, especially in the kind of system that they run, which is really important, because it's very clear that Puka can play in the NFL, but he seems to be a perfect fit for what the Rams have going on, and that's more important than like individual skills sometimes, because there's a lot of guys who have good tangible physical skills but don't fit the system that they get drafted into, and so they kind of fall to the wayside. But this is a backbreaker type game. It seems like the injury situation with the Rams is getting worse and worse every single week you hear about it. They got a lot of shit going on, and most of it's not good. This was pretty bad for the defense up front, mainly because there's a lot of pressure on them to go out there and basically get the Cowboys ran through them because they were able to score at will. And now there's been so many games this season where the defense for the Rams has had to bail out the offense. And they can only do it for so long, right? They don't have necessarily like a whole array of superstar pass rushers. Like they have Byron Young, once again, really good draft pick. They have Aaron Donald, once again, one of the greatest to ever do it. 2 pass rushers is not what it takes in the current NFL. It takes like a whole squad of them. That's why the Eagles are so good. Like when they get into the fourth quarter, guys like Sweat, guys like Hassan Reddick, they're not tired because they've only done like 20 reps. Like we were making that joke. Me and my friends were making that joke a lot last season. We were talking about Brandon Graham, and we were like, look, all right, guys, you know what time it is. It's the second half. It's time for Brandon Graham to get his 10 reps in and absolutely destroy this game, because that's what it really came down to. It was like they had so many talented pass rushers up front. And it was just like, yep, these old dudes coming in, like the young bugs, the young guys up front, they do all the work in terms of like stopping the run. They do all the work in terms of getting the early pass rush to kind of like freak out the defense, wear down the tackles and stuff like that. And then they send the old dudes to go in there and just bash them over the head, hit that home run out of there and take all the glory. Because that's basically what's happened. Like Hassan Reddick has played a lot of reps, a lot of snaps and stuff like that. But he's like a totally different beast in the fourth quarter because he's just well rested. Because he's got so many guys he can count on. It's pretty funny. But yeah, it takes a whole squad. It takes a whole squad, and they just don't have it, man. Like there's so many instances where like they clearly have overachieved for what their defense has available to them in terms of talent, but it can only take them so far. And this is a prime example of like the Cowboys come into this objectively position by position to be the more talented football team. And it showed itself really early on in this game. Jaguars, Steelers. Steelers have another terrible offensive showing after having a really good one the previous week. Then on Thursday Night Football, they actually looked kind of decent, but they got another problem brewing that stemmed from a young man by the name of George Pickens. Another problem brewing, as people would say. But Jaguars, Steelers, Jaguars went out there and they did their thing, man. They controlled the time. They controlled all the possessions. Now, we're still waiting on the pass game to really click, right? Like, they seem to be relatively limited in who they feel comfortable actually throwing the ball to. We're still waiting to see Calvin Ridley have, like, that big explosive game, like that I'm back kind of game. He had a couple of really explosive plays early on in the season, but it feels like as time has gone on, it's kind of dialing down a little bit. But, you know, adjustments happen. None of these teams are going to be the exact same from week to week, let alone month to month, because we're coming up on the halfway point of the NFL season after this week, which means that when we're done, we're not going to be talking about like individual. We're not going to talk about as much individual games on the next breakdown of everything that's going on. We're going to talk about like what the league looks like as a whole, like who's looking like we thought they would at the beginning of the season, who's changed the most, who's changed the least, who's changed for the better, who's changed for the worse. Because that's if there's anything that epitomizes life sometimes in sports, it is how things change so quickly for so many players. Anyway, this was a heartbreaker. It's another terrible Steelers offensive performance, and I'm starting to believe that people actually believe in Kenny Pickett. They just don't like Matt Canada being the guy to go out there and orchestrate for him. Because when Kenny Pickett has chances to go out there and extend plays and stuff like that, he finds ways to do it, but it just isn't like the system is not conducive to it. Up front, they had the whole situation where they were talking about what Trevor Lawrence called terrible towels napkins. Always fun. And then talk the talk, walk the walk. They beat the brakes off the Steelers, and they took them. They were out there waving the terrible towels at the Steelers fans, which is really funny. That was objectively really cool. I'm sure they're totally not going to bring it up later when the Steelers and the Jaguars play, because if you think about it, the Steelers are the team that prevented the Jaguars from having their best season ever, or their second best season ever. They eliminated them from the AFC Championship game, or the AFC Championship contention, when they had one of the craziest, the boat, when Blake Bortles was the boat, the best of all time season, and they lost to the Steelers. It was wild. They were on a roll, and then all of a sudden the Steelers defense just was a wall, full on collision. Now let's move along. Let's wait. Let me check my notes real quick. Make sure I got everything in here. I got one more game on here for the heartbreak. Actually, a couple more games. I don't know how this didn't get in there. So we got. That's a different category. My bad. That's why it didn't get in there. Let's move on to the oh my category, where these are the games that I saw this past weekend that had an interesting wrinkle in terms of like who won and how they won. So Thursday Night Football was Buccaneers Bills. The Buccaneers live action, right? Buccaneers technically right behind the Falcons and probably like looking like the best team, second best team in the NFC South, despite as of late, calm down, the Saints have been kind of heating up a little bit. Derek Carr been kind of slinging that thing like his AC joint doesn't hurt anymore. Who would have thought? All it took was 57 checkdowns to Alvin Kamara. By the way, Alvin Kamara's got 39 catches since he came back. I think he's been back for like 4 games. So, yeah. Anyway, he's got better season than most wide receivers. Texans, Panthers. I just wanted to point out, that's why I said it was the oh my kind of game. One, Bills not being able to run away from a team. The Buccaneers, still a very talented defense up front. Baker Mayfield and them bad hips. The bad hips from Baker Mayfield. Nonetheless, the Buccaneers are very quickly becoming a one-dimensional team, and in the NFC South, that's going to work, but against like higher caliber teams like the Bills, it's just not. 24-18, not the kind of game you thought we were going to see, but it was a prime example of the Buccaneers having all the potential in the world to be able to beat any team that lines up against them. Just depends on the day. The Texans and the Panthers played each other. This is an interesting one because it was an example of the defense from the Panthers actually standing up and standing strong. The Texans started out this game red hot. They scored 2 touchdowns and missed a PAT, if I'm not mistaken, to start it off, and then they did not score in the second half of this one. The Panthers were able to come from behind. Remember, they got a new play caller in terms of the offensive side of the ball, so 15 points, not a great start, but nonetheless, first dub of the season means a lot. These are by the way, it's definitive, right? Like the number 1 player and the number 2 player in the draft played each other. That means that we know who wins, right? We know who the best one is. The best one, the best of them all. Bryce Young, right? It has to be. There's no room for interpretation or anything like that. So, yeah, that happened. Everybody thought it was cool. The crazy picture after the game with all the Alabama players taking a photo together, and then some of them were like in the comments of other ones being like, "Oh, I missed out on the photo," and it's like, "Damn, dog! Like how many?" you have those moments where you're like, "God damn, dude! How many dudes you got going out there turning up?" And it's like a lot, bro. A lot. Like we all suspect, a lot of Alabama football players are very good at football. Who would have thought? First blown loss of D'Amico Ryan's career. Shout out to him. Congratulations. Welcome to being a normal human being, which you've not been coaching like vast majority of the season. The Broncos played the Chiefs. Don't know if you guys know this. If you combine throwing interceptions with dropping passes, you lose like this, 24-9. This was an example of what we talked about earlier in a couple of other matchups, like when they played the Jets, and I was like, why were the Jets like patting themselves on the back for beating the Broncos? Like, very clearly, the Broncos were the more potent team throughout the course of this game. They just weren't consistent. And this is a prime example of, like, if you give the Broncos a bunch of possessions, they're able to actually be a consistent offense. If you have 3 extra possessions, you should be able to put more than 24 points on the board, but that's not for me to judge. That's not for me to judge. I'm just a dude on the internet. But, yeah, it's still a pathetic offensive performance, but when you get extra possessions like that, man, you got to be able to capitalize on them. And once again, the drops are piling up, and the effects of the drops on the pace that the offense is running for the Chiefs is massive, bro. Massive. If you can find a way to bracket correctly with Travis Kelce, them other cats, we're waiting on Scott Moore to turn up, man. I feel like we should be really handing the ball to Isaiah Pacheco a lot more, but it's just not in their offensive nature, right? The logic is that every time you snap the ball and Patrick Mahomes gives it's a play other than giving the ball to Patrick Mahomes, it's probably a bad idea. I like that logic. Sometimes Isaiah Pacheco is really good at football too. Most of the time I've seen Isaiah play football this season, he has gained yards. I would dare say he probably has the fewest yards or fewest plays where he has been tackled for a loss in the NFL this season. So I actually need to look that up. Vikings, Packers. So this is one I wrote a bunch of shit about, and we're going to sit here and go through it. I watched this one. It was fucking weird. So the Vikings, weird as fuck pressure, wins them this game. If you've not been paying attention, I've been slowly but surely mentioning throughout the course of the season, the Vikings are weird about how they generate pressure. And it's kind of cool, and it's kind of weird, and it's good and bad all at the same time. That's been their secret, by the way, of coming back and winning these games. So, how do I explain it? They send extra people like Harrison Smith. Almost called him Harrison Phillips again. Once again, Harrison Phillips is the defensive tackle for the Vikings, not Harrison Smith, the safety, who is black, but his skin is very pale. Harrison Smith has he has a sack in this game for a reason, and it's because they blitz him a ton, and it affects the looks that quarterbacks are faced up against. Right, they're going up against the Green Bay Packers, who, you know, a lot of people talk about the offensive line situation. I think it's more about decision making from Jordan Love, because there's so many moments where Jordan Love clearly knows where the ball is supposed to be, and he throws it, and it gets there, and the ball moves up and down the field. I got to talk about the crazy shit that happened stats wise for Jordan Love in this game, and I got it written down so that I don't fumble over it. But I just want to point out the Vikings and their weird ass blitzes and their pressure that comes from like weird places, plus the fact that they actually have really good pass rushers in Wanham and not Unique Ngakoue. I don't know why I said Unique Ngakoue, but yeah. But in Wanham and like everybody else who generates pressure for him, as you can tell, forgot the name. Gonna move on from that. Anyway, that led the way for this game. They had the Packers already struggling offense in shambles by halftime. Jordan Love had 70 passing yards at halftime. I don't know if you know anything about passing the ball in the NFL. When you have 70 yards, it's bad. It's bad. He didn't complete a pass over 5 yards until the Packers' final drive of the first half. The Packers offense did the thing again. That was the kind of the story of the game too. They did that thing where they only show up for like one portion of the game. It's typically the fourth quarter, but they kind of sometimes, you know, in this one, I'll give them credit. They showed up for the second half of the game, which, hey, if we're just going to have these moments where like we start showing up earlier and earlier in the game, we can win a lot of games, you know what I mean? But showing up for the second half usually doesn't bode very well. The Viking, it's 10-3 at halftime in this game, right? The Vikings score on their very first drive out of the gate. Kirk Cousins was dealing in this one. First drive out of the quarter, 6 plays later, they score again because Jordan Love throws a pick that is possibly the greatest broadcaster's jinx of all time. Jonathan Vilma was the color analyst on this game, and Kenny Albert was the play-by-play announcer. At one point, the Packers are on their own 4-yard line. It's 4th and 3 or 3rd and 3 or something, and Jonathan Vilma says into the microphone on purpose, I haven't heard much from Jaden Reed, who is one of the wide receivers for the Packers today. He's up in the slot. He's one of Jordan Love's favorite guys. Kenny Albert responds by saying, only 1 catch from Reed today. They snap the ball. Jordan Love throws to Jaden Reed for only the 2nd time today. Jaden catches the ball, and then guess what? The linebacker for the Vikings snatches it out of his hands. Linebacker wide receiver. You heard that correct. He snatches the ball out of Reed's hands and runs it back. And one play after he is tackled, the Vikings score again. And this was to Jordan Addison. He just ran a streak route, and the Packers forgot. In the most football thing of all time, where it's like the play immediately after a turnover, the offense has like this magical ability of like any play that we run is going to end up with us scoring this touchdown. Anyway, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about what happens after the interception for Jordan Love. After the pick, all of a sudden, Jordan Love remembers how to be an NFL quarterback. And I don't mean just like any NFL quarterback, like a good one. So he went 14 for 27 for the rest of the game. after the interception. He had 1 touchdown. At one point, he had 7 straight completions. 10 of the completions out of the 14 that he had were for 10 yards or more. 2 of those completions were for over 30 yards. The Packers scored to make it 24-10, which eventually becomes the final score in this one. But I just want to point out, did you hear what I said? Like, all of a sudden, he just started throwing the ball down the field and everything was open against a very, very good defense. So it's a combination of probably the coaching staff figuring it out. But for the most part, Jordan Love slinging that thing. And if he did this 14 for 27, 7 straight completions, 10 completions for over 10 yards, 2 completions for over 10, 2 more of those were for 10. 2 more of those were for over 30 yards. If he was able to figure that out, he had 10 completions that were over 20 or more, right? That's crazy. If they can figure out how to tap into that guy all the time, they win every game. Their defense was there. Their defense was on fire this entire game. Their defense actually, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, the Packers scored to make it 24-10. That became the final score. No reason to talk about anything else that happens, like in terms of scoring or offense or anything like that. But we'll talk about what happened in the rest of the game. The most important takeaway of this game, in the penultimate drive for the Vikings in this one, the Packers defense stood the fuck up. Back-to-back sacks. The second sack in the back-to-back leads to Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles, and he's out for the season, which is fucking terrible. Because honestly, this was shaping up to be probably Kirk Cousins' best season ever as an NFL quarterback, because it felt like, and a lot of people have been saying this, and I mean it too, I've been saying it since like week 3, where you watch the Vikings and you're like, that doesn't look like a team that sucks. That doesn't look like a team that's going to lose a lot of games, and yet here we are talking about another Vikings loss, right? Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles. Obviously, pretty much everything the Vikings had going on probably going down the drain. The Vikings have remedied that in some way, shape, or form by trading for Josh Dobbs, the former starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. So it means one of 2 things is happening. We talked about it last week, where Kyler Murray was in play, according to some people. He did not end up in play. The Cardinals had Josh Dobbs out there. It's either Clayton Tune, the former University of Houston quarterback, who's going to be the starter, or it's going to be Kyler Murray, another quarterback from Texas, starting again. We'll see, as the Cardinals seem to be a team that is in contention for a very special prize, and that prize being Caleb Williams. Anyway, the field goal attempt ensuing after the back-to-back sacks is blocked and returned, and possibly one of the worst production moves of the entire season so far. They cut away to show you Kirk Cousins on the bench writhing in pain as the Packers are returning a blocked field goal in a game that is 24-10. Now, I know it seems like it's out of reach, but it's not absolutely a blowout, right? That return could have been a touchdown for all we know, but they did run him out of bounds at like around the 50-yard line or whatever. Crazy decision from the director up front. I think that was more of an accident than anything. The Packers, they probably were under the assumption, as a person who's been able to listen in on production trucks for NFL teams, they are on point 99.9% of the time, and sometimes they assume certain plays are going to happen a certain way, like you see a field goal getting kicked by an NFL kicker, you think it's just going to go in or not go in, and you don't assume that it's going to get blocked and then returned by the opposing team for like 20 yards, right? The Packers defense does everything but fucking score the fucking touchdowns for the offense in this game. Basically, after, like we mentioned before, in this game, they forced a fumble, they recovered a fumble at the Vikings' 12-yard line, and naturally that drive ends in a turnover on downs for the Packers. Classic. The game is basically over. Kirk Cousins, the loss is, and I say basically over, it is over. I'm done talking about it. It was pretty bad. This game, once again, second half of this game, all Packers. The Vikings did put some points on the board. They, like we said before, they scored back-to-back. They scored back-to-back buckets in this situation, right? They scored back-to-back touchdowns at the beginning of the third quarter, and it kind of just put the nail in the coffin for any chance of the Packers to be able to come back, because their offense does not score like that. Now the question starts to become, with Josh Dobbs getting traded to the Vikings, is this like a real thing that we're anticipating happening, or are we looking at Josh Dobbs as a backup situation? From everything that I've heard, Jalen Hall is starting this week. I should probably check on that. They probably have updated that. By the way, Jalen Hall, who, my bad. Jaron Hall, I think is his actual name. But anyway, he came in towards the end of the game and he couldn't complete a pass. Let me see. Let me check. Jaron Hall. Let me see a picture of Jaron Hall. Couldn't see him with his helmet on. So this is interesting. He looks like he's a black guy. He's a rookie in the NFL. But one thing to take away from this is, did not know BYU was letting non-white people and non-Samoan people into BYU. Didn't know that was a thing. Anyway, he's a 5th round pick too, so they believe in him. I don't get that was my number one thing about, like, hey, what's up with this trading situation? You know what I mean? What's up with this trade situation for this trade situation for Josh Dobbs? I want to point out Josh Dobbs is probably going to be able to retell all the crazy shit that happened to him throughout the course of this season, because he's been on a roller coaster and now he's on a different team. Like, he went from dude that literally was like basically out of the league to getting signed after training camp was over with, or like getting signed right before training camp by the Cardinals to become the starting quarterback, and now has earned his way into being of trade value to NFL teams. And now he's in Minnesota, like, to line up against a team that, if some things do go the right way, I'm not saying they got enough talent to be able to carry a rookie quarterback. I don't think they do, but it's good. They're going to be in a situation. They're in a situation where, KLC is in his 2nd year as a head coach. They're probably not going to fire him. He's looked. They looked pretty good this season. They had a couple wins that slipped away from him, but finding out if Hall can be the guy with Kirk Cousins legitimately going into free agency at the end of this season, or dude, he's basically a free agent right now, right? He's hurt. He's not coming back this season. He's a free agent. Anyway, we move on. Let's talk about some other stuff that happened. Oh, man, I clicked a bunch of stuff and all the word jargon came up. Let's talk about, oh, my bad. This is what we're here for. This is the final category where we talk about the games that left us feeling all tingly inside. That, for the most part, these are the kind of games that make NFL fans. These are the games that are so good that if you tell your friends to ask you what happened this weekend in the NFL, and they ask you, like, what is one of the games that I should watch, it's one of these 3 games that I got listed over here. Seahawks, Browns, it was a lot of fun. PJ Walker looking a little bit more comfortable as this game goes on. There was a lot of great pass rush from the Seahawks up front. Seahawks start off this game looking pretty hot, and then the Browns come up towards the back end of it, and they start turning the fuck up. They turned the fuck up in this one. Watched this game, had a lot of fun. I'm a Seahawks fan, obviously, as I'm wearing my new Seahawks hoodie. Anyway, Seahawks turn up in this one. Kenneth Walker, still killing it. The Browns defense turns up. The Browns offense finally finds a little bit of rhythm. Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt combine together to kind of make this. They kind of make this, gets a little busy, gets a little competitive, if you will, when it's all said and done. But for the most part, there's essentially, this is the Seahawks in the second half of this game. Their offense shut down. They had a couple of turnovers. Geno Smith has one. He had multiple turnovers in this game again, which, by the way, you can almost guarantee is going to happen this weekend when they go up against. Were they playing the 49ers? I think they're playing the 49ers this weekend. Yeah, man, it's a consistent thing. It's going to keep happening. The Browns are top 5. Actually, really, the Browns are like the number one. The Browns are the number 1 defense in the NFL right now with the way the 49ers have been playing. So it's just one of those things, man. Like, it's consistently happened regardless of, like, the quality of the team that he's faced off against. And some of them are kind of dumb. Like the interception he throws in this game to DK Metcalf. He runs an out route. DK Metcalf is like the size of a fucking barn, and the way that Geno throws the ball allows for a corner who's sitting 5 yards off of DK Metcalf, the worst place possible for a DB to be lined up, right? Because they're not trying to defend DK, they're trying to play the ball. He jumps it, intercepts it, runs it back, puts the offense for the Browns in position to be able to score, and that's basically what happened in the back half of this game. The turnovers set up the offense, and the offense was able to come up with like little morsels of points here and there, but they couldn't figure it out. Another good showing from PJ Walker. Another sign that PJ Walker may or may not just stay the starting quarterback to finish off this season because very quickly Kevin Stefanski's job has become on the line, as some people would say. Watch that game. Tons of fun. A lot of really good plays. Jackson Smith and Jigba finally emerging for the Seattle Seahawks offense as a wide receiver, as an end-around guy, as a screen guy. Tyler Lockett has another killer game. Amari Cooper makes a couple of really killer catches throughout the course of this one. And David Njoku bodies multiple times over. Bobby had another... The man, the myth, the legend, Bobby Wagner has another killer game. You know what time it is. Moving on, another really exciting game. This one was fun because we got to, it's not very often you get to see the emergence of a true contender in terms of starter for an NFL team. And this 28-23 game between the Titans and the Falcons was a prime example of it. I would like to start off by pointing out this was hands down, probably is, this broadcast team should not be put together anymore. They had Jay Feely and a lady by the name of Martha. But the biggest problem is James Lofton, who was talking over everyone the entire game. Like, people were trying to set him up for jokes, and he was like, oh, no, I'm the star of this one. He's the color analyst. He was trying to talk over Jay Feely while Jay Feely was talking about kicking. If you're not familiar, Jay Feely is like one of the greatest kickers in the history of the NFL, and he actually talks about kicking at a pretty high level, and punting as well. James Lofton is trying to talk over him. James played like in the 80s or some shit like that, and it was like, dude, you're breaking almost every single fundamental rule about when it comes to broadcasting, when you should not be the person that people are tweeting about during the game. And there are multiple, if you type in James Lofton, Falcons Titans, it comes up multiple times over. There's a couple of super misogynistic tweets about the fact that they had a female play-by-play analyst, which we're in 2023, bro. We're in 2023, bro. There are dudes that literally, like, their take on the internet is the sound of women's voices is annoying. It's like, dude, hey man, look, I support all my LGBT brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? Brothers, sisters, and theys. Love them all. If you hate women that much, bro, you got options. You know what I mean? You got options. It's just one of those things, bro. It really is. It's super annoying because it's like it comes up every single time when because it was really like, if you were really paying attention to this game, if you weren't such a piece of shit, I'm talking about the people on Twitter, you would know that James Lofton is a massive, massive problem for this. I don't know. I try not to tweet about it because it's one, disparaging another black man who, and you could very easily say that I'm jealous or whatever. I'm nowhere near in the rooms of conversations that the people who hired James Lofton to do his job are discussing, right? But yeah, three-man booths are always tough, especially in the NFL, because the plays have so little time in between. And there were so many times where she's having to, I think it was Maggie, has to talk over James before the ball gets snapped. And there's literally like one rule when it comes to being a color analyst: stop talking when the ball gets snapped or when it's about to get snapped, so the play-by-play broadcaster can describe what is going on. It should not be a radio broadcast. It is a visual medium. There should be a lot more silence in that broadcast than there was. Anyway, I'm moving on from that. It was terrible. It was easily the worst. It was easily the worst play-by-play. It was easily the worst broadcasting booth I've heard this season so far. 28-23. If you didn't hear about this one, apparently Mayo Boy is really good at playing football. I will point out this game was deceptive. It starts off with a very typical script that you see from a team like the Tennessee Titans and the Falcons. The third play of the game is a gadget play with Malik Willis, who is supposed to be at this point splitting snaps with Mayo Boy. And Mayo Boy is Will Levis, by the way. Look it up. It's a joke. It's not even a joke. It's a comment that he made in an article a long time ago that has now gotten severely out of control. It's just hard to believe that a dude with biceps like that eats mayo, but apparently he was all about it back in the day, and he's not about it anymore. And I'm like, oh, likely story. That was one of the things that they talked about during the broadcast, and they were like, well, a lot of people still talk about the Mayo thing because it was kind of weird, and they're like, it was really weird. There were people in the booth that were like, it was really weird. It wasn't kind of weird, but he was like, I don't even do that anymore. And I'm like, that's exactly what a person who still does it would say. That's a person who likes mayo with their coffee. That's exactly what they would say because there's nobody there to prove it, right? The Titans fumble on a gadget play to Malik Willis, and that is the last time we see Malik Willis for the entirety of this game. The Titans run a fake punt to keep a drive alive. I like the juice on that one. Will Levis airs it out a couple of plays later, and it essentially changes everything about the trajectory of the Titans season. He airs it out. DeAndre Hopkins tackles the defensive back that's trying to play defense against him, catches the ball and then runs it into the end zone. It was very clearly offensive pass interference, and it was not called. It was very blatant. He's running a streak route. The DB, who I think is A.J. Terrell, runs him out of bounds, which if you're familiar with the technique, it's when you're running side by side, and as time goes on, you're slightly stepping in front of a wide receiver that you're pretty sure is running a streak route, which forces them to keep stepping to the left until they are out of bounds. And even though they are running up the field, they are out of the play completely. And it's a very common technique to stop guys who are really good at making contested catches. And DeAndre Hopkins, very good at making contested catches because he is what me and my friends like to call the push king. He is the king of offensive pass interference, and he gets called for it like nobody's business. And 99% of the time, they don't call it at all. He wrapped up A.J. Terrell and he semi-tackled him to throw him out of the way to be able to catch a football and run it in for the end zone for a touchdown. It was brutal as a person who's a big proponent of defensive players getting a fair shake, which they almost never do. The Titans scored a touchdown in every single quarter of this game. DeAndre Hopkins, like I said, he scored 3 times, and it's the only time he's ever had 3 touchdowns in a single game, which is wild to think about with the fact that he's played with Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray as quarterbacks, right? The Titans defense ate the Falcons offensive line alive. One of these sacks, Arden Key and Jeffrey Simmons get past the D-line. They run a twist, a GT twist, which is guard to tackle twist, and they both slip through during the twist, and they essentially like dive on him like they're in SummerSlam. They dive on him like he's on from the top rope, and they take him down for a sack at like the 3-yard line or something like that. The second half starts. The Falcons, they do the thing. They do it. They pull Desmond Ridder. The diddler is done as of now. Taylor Heineke comes in, and his first drive ends in a field goal for the Falcons. His first drive ends better than what happened for the Falcons in their first drive. Heineke flat out outthrows Ridder. Like, there's no question about it whatsoever. He's a better quarterback, and he's one of those guys that it's really tough to have as a backup QB because almost everybody knows that he is a better quarterback than the starter. And, you're giving a guy a chance, right? 8, 9, 10 weeks or whatever to try and figure it out. And Heineke did a really good job of taking advantage of the skill position guys that the Falcons have, putting them in a position to be able to succeed. The Titans' pressure was ridiculous all game, combined with the fact that they kept putting the Falcons in terrible field position, which compounded the effectiveness of their defense up front. They lost Kevin Byard to a trade, and they had one of their best defensive performances of the season versus the Falcons. Now, the Titans' offense really kept it kind of balanced. They had a lot of short yardage stuff that went to Derrick Henry. They had a lot of screens. They had a lot of running Derrick Henry up the middle. And you could see the effect that Will Levis's ability to be able to throw the ball down the field had on the offensive line, who had been struggling mightily vast majority of the season. And in this game, they looked the best they've looked all season. They looked the best they've looked all year. It's a wrap. It's a wrap for any other quarterback that's not Will Levis for the Titans. There's just no way to put it, especially for the next 3-4 games, because you got to find out like if he can continue to do this. He played on Thursday Night Football and he looked pretty good. Had a situation where he had a game-winning drive where I questioned some of the play calling. There at one point they're in 4-down territory, right? Time is ticking down. They are trying to complete a 4th and 1 with like 4 minutes on the clock. They have 2 run plays sandwiched between a run and a pass play. So they pass the ball on a screen, it gets dropped. They run the ball up the middle, it's -2. They run the ball up the middle again, but with Tajay Spears. And then the 4th down play is very blatantly just a passing down. Almost like the offensive coordinator set him up for failure. Tim Kelly's their OC, who I think was the OC for the Texans last year. And I cannot think of a worse play call than to have 2 run plays and then have fourth down be fourth and longer than 5 yards. So now everybody in the stadium knows that this is a pass play, right? I will say, going back to the Falcons-Titans game, it was very clear that if Taylor Heinicke had started this game, the Falcons would have won. The Falcons would have won it from 3 points in the first half. They went from 3 points in the first half to 20 in the second with a game-winning drive that ends with a drop of a wide-open throw to Van Jefferson on fourth down to keep a drive alive. By the way, random fact, did not know this, Van Jefferson's dad played for the Falcons. Knew he played in the NFL, knew he was a coach, but he played for the Falcons, where Van Jefferson now plays. Kind of cool. Weird shit that happens in this game. It's 4th and 3 for the Titans. In the middle of the third, D-Hop and Treylon Burke run a pick play. Treylon Burke catches the ball and runs towards the sideline, past the marker, and extends the ball. It's clearly a first down, and in the process, he knocks over a ref. The ref is like out of bounds. Treylon Burks is running out of bounds because he's about to get tackled. The ref gets up and throws a flag, and it initially looks like him throwing a flag because he got shut down. James Lofton and his dumb self kept talking about, like, that's messed up if that's what that flag is for. And it's like, it's for the pick play, bro. He calls offensive pass interference and says that Burke was short, even though he was very clearly like a yard and a half past the first down marker. Anyway, it results in a 4th and 13 and a punt. And CBS runs it back multiple times over, and they're like, look at this. He's past the marker. It's really weird. Moving on. Lucas Oil Stadium had another weird game. Gardner Minshew still tearing it up, still doing his thing. The Saints, they're back. Back to marching. 38-27 was the final score in this one. The Colts' second drive in this game ends in a touchdown off the most anti-pro analytics play I've ever seen. Yes, I said anti-pro analytics because it was that wild. So describing it off the top, the Colts can't pass the ball on drive number 2. Luckily for them, they have Jonathan the Toolman Taylor. He still exists in their offense, even though they barely want to pay him. They start a drive on their own 19-yard line, so they have to go 81 yards to be able to score a touchdown, right? JT and Zach Moss combined for 63 of the 81 yards needed. A lot of yards needed, right? By the way, Zach Moss had 1 of the 63. So Jonathan Taylor had 62. Zach Moss had 1 of the 63. They decide on 4th and inches at the 18-yard line, I believe, of the Saints in this situation, initially to go for the field goal. They kick the field goal. The Saints get called for illegal procedure for covering the long snapper, which is weird because the penalty didn't do anything. It was half the distance to the goal on 4th and inches, so it was still, you guessed it, 4th and inches. So it went from like 11 inches to 5.5 or some shit like that, making it 4th and less than inches. That 5 inches or so inspired the Colts in their heart of hearts, and they knew what the right thing to do was. They went for it, and they threw a pass to Michael Pittman Jr. and scored a touchdown. Analytics. So, yeah, 6 inches makes a lot of difference, apparently. And the Saints are alive. Derek Carr apparently has recovered from his AC joint injury, and he threw the shit out of the ball in this game. Rashid Shaheed was killing it. Michael Thomas had a lot of... by the way, Michael Thomas, not slant boy anymore. Seeing a lot of in routes caught by Michael Thomas and getting up the field and stuff like that. It's good to see him out there doing his thing like he's done for a really long time. He was a lot of fun. Final game for the This Is What We're Here For category. The Eagles played the Commanders 38-31. Sad to say, yet another game where you can make a big argument that the Commanders' offensive line kind of betrayed them in this one. So the Eagles 38-31. They just traded for Kevin Byard. Not great. First game, 31 points on the board, right? That's not how it works. That's not how all that works or whatever. Obviously, it's going to take them time to adjust to everything that happens. But the fact of the matter is the Eagles are just the Eagles are the most complete team in the NFL, and they show it pretty much every single weekend, and nobody believes them. The Commanders, divisional opponent, divisional rivals. This situation happens again where A.J. Brown is lined up against rookie Emmanuel Forbes Jr., and bad things happen for him. A.J. Brown, I think the streak of the 6 straight games with 125 plus yards started against Emmanuel Forbes a couple of weeks ago, and it continues on. A.J. Brown turns out being big and strong and fast is really beneficial to winning football games. I wish somebody had told me that. I just did the big part. Anyway, 38-31. Ever since, and I kid you not, I think we can all attest to this, ever since that night on Thursday Night Football, week 2, A.J. Brown's like yelling at Jalen Hurts on the sideline. They start trying to figure out how to get the ball down the field. It feels like Jalen's been on fire. He's been tearing it up. I know, it's never going to always look 100% pretty, and nobody's just going to completely steamroll anybody in the NFL. I listen to Bomani. By the way, Bomani Jones is back if you're a fan of his podcast. The Right Time is officially back. It is a ways. I don't know if he works for Dwayne Wade or some other company called Wade's Product or something like that. He's out there doing his thing. Check out The Right Time. It's still on the same podcast feed and everything like that. It was kind of, it was amazing. Like I felt like legit joy in my heart when I heard his voice again, talking into a microphone. If you don't know, Bomani Jones is, in my opinion, like one of the best sportscasters in the game right now. And, I don't try and emulate him or anything like that. He's on a different level in terms of like entertainment value and connection with people and stuff like that. But that guy he's a huge part of why I continue to do what I do, and he kind of helped me realize that it was possible for me to do this kind of deal. Anyway, he's back. His podcast is back. He's with some other company or whatever, and he's in that weird process where when you take a long break and you got to get back into the saddle of having performing on a microphone. And on top of that, he's now doing straight up live streams on YouTube streams and stuff like that, which is a different beast in and of itself, where he doesn't see the comments, he doesn't have any transitions, there's no editing that happens, anything like that. It's not a segment. He has to be continuous all the way through when he's making a statement and all this kind of stuff like that. So definitely worth the listen. He had Spencer Hall on to talk about the Dabo Swinney conversation. By the way, excellent episode of the Shutdown Fullcast, where they get under every single nook and cranny of the Dabo Swinney rant that he had on the Sports Talk radio show, where he has to go and talk to the media, talk to the people every single week. And they have a point in the show where they're like, it's ridiculous that it's kind of funny that every single multi-million-dollar college football head coach, no matter how good they are, no matter how bad they are, every single week has to do some kind of generic sports talk radio show where they go on air for an hour or to a sports bar where people have like direct access to them to be able to ask them questions about like random people who know jack shit about football in comparison to a Division I football coach. Even a bad Division I football coach knows more than like some random dude who's like, I went to state in 7 or 6, which is like half of the people who exist in East Texas and West Texas as well. I went to state in 76, and you boys need to get back to the basics. The wishbone is what needs to happen. And they still have to do they got to do a radio show every single week and talk to like regular people who don't know shit about football, which is tough. It's got to be tough. I have a tough time talking to people who have like the most generic opinions about football possible, that are clearly like stuff they heard on ESPN and they're just regurgitating it to me, or the person that when I respond, like I talk on this podcast about football, when I respond like that and they literally are like, oh, trying to change the subject, like those people are really tough for me to talk to. I can't imagine how bad it is for a football coach to talk to a person who's trying to give them tips on how to coach elite level athletes. But anyway, Dabo Swinney had that. Check it out. It's really funny. One other game in this one, the Ravens played the Cardinals in a really close matchup. Once again, the Cardinals continue to impress at every single turn of this season. A lot of people, it's easy to shit on them because they haven't won a bunch of games or whatever. They're 1-7 in this season. But if you watch their games, this team is clearly better than some of these teams out here that have like 4 wins. They score a touchdown in the first quarter, and then they score 17 points in the fourth, like a normal team does. Which, by the way, it's really weird that there are multiple teams that have this same thing where they're like, I show up in the first quarter and the fourth, not in between. Not me in between, no thank you. There's still, the weirdest thing is like the sudden change to the weirdest thing to me is the sudden change to running Josh Dobbs into the ground. Never, that wasn't a thing that was going on in the first like 3 weeks of the season. They were letting him throw the ball around a lot more, and they added that aspect to it. And I think it's part of. I personally think it's part of the tanking process or whatever. Anyway, the 2 turnovers for a team that doesn't necessarily have. They did not have the talent advantage at very many positions in this game, and 2 turnovers is always going to result in a loss in those situations, and that's what happened here. The Ravens underperformed drastically in this one and still were able to win this one pretty towards the end. They were still able to win this one. They only had four third down conversions. It was kind of brutal. Like, that's the New York Jets level type stuff. Anyway, their defense stood up again, and they were able to piece it together. Something about the Cardinals, man. I don't know what it is. They get in people's ass. They held Lamar to 157 yards passing after he's coming off 2 of the better games of his entire season this past week. And this is yet again another problem has reared its ugly head. And it is the inconsistency of the Ravens. There are times where they are the best team in the NFL, and there are times that I question whether or not they could beat the Panthers. You know, and that was one of those situations. Moving on, Thursday night. This is the part of the show where I'm actually going to change it up a little bit because it's time to have a conversation. It's time to talk. Let's rap a little bit, folks. Let's rap. We're gonna break down Week 9, do predictions, and we're gonna get out of here. I'm gonna keep the predictions short and simple. I took Tennessee to win. For Thursday Night Football was Tennessee at Pittsburgh. I took Tennessee to win, and I took Tennessee plus 3.5. I lost by 0.5 point and did not get the Tennessee dub. So we start off the week with a loss. Baby, it's all good. By the way, don't forget, Amazon Prime Video may be the only place you can watch Thursday Night Football, but apparently when they say the only place, they mean also Twitch. You can watch for free on Twitch. You don't need to subscribe. You go to Amazon Prime Video on Twitch and you can watch it for free. I know they have the thing where you can watch it in Prime Video or whatever, but if you really wanted to watch Thursday Night Football, you can watch it on Twitch or NFLreplay.net. Anyway, the Germany games are here. Get ready, folks. It's 8:30 in the morning if you're in God's time, aka Central Time. By the way, RIP to the West Coast, my guys. Holy shit, 6:30 in the morning for you folks? I couldn't do it. I love football. I don't think I love it that much. Miami at Kansas City. This one's supposed to be super interesting. Kansas City coming off a really bad loss. Miami coming off a pretty decisive win. Now, what we got here is the Miami Dolphins are going up against another good football team, which obviously for a lot of people spells automatic loss. I, on the other hand, believe in the fact that the Dolphins have finally got their defense exactly where they want it to be. Should have probably checked to whether or not Xavier Howard is playing. Let's see. Xavier Howard back in Week 9, question mark. I should have checked whether or not they were playing on Sunday. He didn't play last week. Xavier Howard didn't play last week, so that was one of my big things. Yeah, I can't find it. I gotta move on with my life. Anyway, I think that's the biggest factor here. Like, if we're talking about the Dolphins with their 2 shutdown corners and they're going up against one of the more pass-heavy teams in the NFL, I'm taking the Dolphins, bro. I'm not even banking on the pass rush to be able to do anything, even though they're gonna be at 100%. They're gonna be at 100% with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb out there. I'm banking on like the pass coverage to be good enough to be able to stop Travis Kelce, which we'll see. But yeah, I'll take the Dolphins up front. That's a massive upset, like right off the rip, just because I like the Dolphins. They're my Super Bowl pick. I think they're one of the more complete teams in the NFL. They just don't play complete football games all the time. The Vikings are playing up against the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are starting a new shiny quarterback in Taylor Heineke versus a quarterback to be named later. No, I'm just kidding. It's Jared Hall, rookie quarterback, black guy. Obviously, got to root for everybody black. That's just how it goes. The announcers on this game are Mark Slareth is the analyst, so you're gonna hear a lot of offensive line conversation up front. That should be interesting. This should be a low-scoring affair. Not even going to lie to you. As good as Taylor Heineke plays football or whatever, but the Vikings defense has been pretty impressive, and same thing for the Falcons. Now, the issue is, and this is actually a good situation for a young quarterback to start off with. The Falcons' defense is really good. Their pass rush is terrible. They had David Onyemata, who's been looking really good this season. They recently lost. Escaped my brain instantaneously. I'm looking at his face in my head. He's on IR. Falcons D tackle IR. Man, dude. That's not him. Sorry. I gotta figure this out, guys. It's Grady Jarrett. Yeah. I pieced it together in my brain. I didn't have to look it up. But yeah, I'll take the Falcons in this situation just because I believe in the quarterback play is going to be better from the Falcons. And Taylor Heinicke with a full football game under his belt. He looked really good against the Tennessee defense that has looked very good this season and similar and comparable in some ways to the Minnesota Vikings. So banking on that to be the reason that they win. The Bears are playing the Saints. I'll be taking the team that has been asleep half of the season, and that'll be the Saints. So Bears season's kind of coming off the rails, kind of burning up, going in a blaze of glory. Would like to point out, this is a funny thing that's been going on. The announcers are Andrew Cladden, Tiki Barber, former Giants running back, and Matt Ryan, who, if you know, Matt Ryan's old job, he used to play starting quarterback for the Falcons. So he's going back to New Orleans, hostile environment. Most people probably will appreciate him just because, like, that's how a lot of football fans are after you retire. They're like, man, you were really cool. You know that? Like, you used to, like, you caused me a lot of pain, but, like, mad respect, bro. You know what I mean? If there's any group of fans that appreciate Matt Ryan more than anybody in the NFL, it has to be the Saints, right? The Rams are playing the Packers. Now, this is interesting. We know the Packers defense is on point. We know Jair Alexander, lockdown corner. Don't know who he's going to lock down. But this is, once again, do I want to gamble on the fact that the Rams' offensive line basically doesn't show up for vast majority of these games? Do I want to gamble on that? That's the tough part for me. I want to see where the people are. I want to see them dancing, walking around. I'm just kidding. Man, it's so tempting to take the Rams, man, but Matthew Stafford's hurt. Oh, man, the Packers are a team that they literally only play 2 quarters a game. They play 2 quarters of football a game, which I think can buy enough time for the Rams to be able to figure out the passing, pass protection situation. They burned me last week. I'm going to go with them again, man. Just pure faith in the fact that the Packers offense is they're just asleep half the game. And it should buy some time. By the way, shout out to the Valparaiso legend on this game, and Adam Amin. We went to the same college. He's obviously way more successful than I am. Shout out Adam Amin out there doing his thing, man. He also works for the Chicago Bears on the TV broadcast, if I'm not mistaken. The Commanders at Patriots. So we got an interesting one here. The easy answer would be the Commanders, who are, by the way, Montez Sweat has been traded to the aforementioned Chicago Bears, right? So their pass rush is a little bit reduced, but the Commanders also traded away Chase Young. I'm sure Daron Payne is going to miss his boys a lot. Man, this one's a tough one because this seems like a prime time for the Patriots offense that has just been kind of like the Patriots offense that has barely played this entire season. Like they scored 17 points against the Dolphins, and for some people that was impressive because they really have struggled to put multiple touchdowns on the board all season. So it's hard to not believe in the Commanders in this situation, despite the fact they played really well against the Eagles, but that was a divisional matchup, right? Pretty much everything outside of that, Sam Howell's been absolutely wrecked in terms of these sack situations. By the way, Sam Howell on pace to absolutely destroy Derek Carr's sack record. Derek Carr, former Houston Texan, if you recall what happened happened to David Carr, I don't know why I said Derek. If you recall what happened after David, he was never the same. He's never the same. Understandable, too. By the way, this is the Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma are the broadcasters on this one, so that'll be funny. A lot of good. Jonathan Vilma does do a good job of focusing in on players that don't get a lot of shine, and there's a lot of wide receivers on the Commanders that don't get a lot of pub. Like Diami Brown is really good, but just doesn't get the ball as often because he's typically not the number one read on a lot of plays. That's Terry McLaurin, and with the pass rush situation, with the pass blocking situation for the Commanders, that usually doesn't bode very well. But yeah, no, linebacker situation, I'm sure he's going to talk a lot about Matthew Judon at defensive end and Jawan Bentley. So, Seahawks, Ravens. This should be one of the most fun games in the entire day because there's going to be plenty of turnovers in it. And the question is whether or not the Ravens are going to show up. This is the game where Bobby reminds everybody that he, too, used to be the king of the backers out here. Jordan Brooks has been having a really good season at linebacker, too, for the Seahawks. I am interested to see. This will be a really good test of, one, the pass rush for the Seahawks, which has been a little skeptical throughout the course of the season. They've done done well against mobile quarterbacks, but with Nwosu out, there's kind of this gap that existed. And last week, like I said before, almost every single week there's been some other defensive lineman that stepped up. And last week it was Aboya Mafe who killed it. I think he had 2 sacks in the game versus the Browns. This is the test for the Seattle Seahawks. I believe in the Seahawks in this one on the defensive side of the ball. It's just going to come down to reducing the turnovers. I'm not even talking about no turnovers. I'm talking about reducing because I think Geno Stone is on like an interception streak so far. He's got 5 interceptions in 9 games or something like that. Just facts are facts. This is going to be a collision of two teams in the NFL that have some of the best defensive players at their position out there, and I cannot wait to see this one. These are 2 of my favorite teams. I'm gonna be honest with you. I love the way like I said before, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are like my second favorite linebacker duo in the NFL. So I'm a big fan. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo are going to be on this one, so they'll be talking about the quarterbacks a ton, which is not going to be fun. Tampa Bay is going to play the Houston Texans. I'll be taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 500 off the fact that I truly believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is better than anything that we've seen. One of the best defenses the Texans have seen all season, to be up front with you, and I think that plays a big role in terms of like what C.J. Stroud is able to do. Also, Dameon Pierce, who, by the way, talk about getting a raw end of the deal. He has been like non-existent, mainly because of the way the team is playing. In terms of like the offensive pace and everything like that, he's just been non-existent as a running back. He's had a couple of opportunities, but it's not consistent enough for a running back to be able to get going. Is the way to phrase it. Iron Eagle, Charles Davis, they're on the call on that one. The Cardinals take on the Browns. So this looks like a trap game. I'm not even gonna lie to you. This looks like a perfect situation for the Cardinals to come out here and pull this win off, mainly because have they made it definitive? It's been a question all week. Is Watson playing in week 9? Deshaun Watson is back to the starting quarterback position. It is hard for me to want to pick the Browns when Deshaun Watson is in charge. Oh man. Yeah, I'm doing it, man. Forget it. Man, it would have been a lot easier to pick these guys when Josh Dobbs was still there at the quarterback position, but with Clayton Tune, it almost feels like it's Jesus, man. Hanging the dude out to dry, like legitimately. Man, and they're keeping it a secret too. They're keeping it a secret all the way up to the end. I want to say, so the everything inside of me says the Browns should win this one, even with the shit quarterback play that Deshaun Watson's going to put on display. And it's because of the defensive presence. They don't just play like defense in terms of generating pressure. They're either going to get Clayton Tune, University of Houston quarterback, right, rookie, who almost threw an interception on a fake punt at one point during the season. And the Browns are just going to eat that guy alive if he plays. Or they're going to get Kyler Murray, who's playing in his first game back after tearing his ACL. And they're going to test that surgery to make sure that everything, they're going to make sure that knee's real stable based off of what I've seen this season. And we're also talking about doing this with a group of wide receivers that should be relative to the quality of the defensive backs we've seen from the Browns and the way that they call their zone, should not be very much of a challenge. It's hard to find a way that the Browns are not winning this one, especially in a low scoring game, knowing that they can run the ball at any given point. So I'll take the Browns. I almost did it. Adam Archuleta is the analyst on that game if you like him. I know some people are real big fans of Adam. The Colts take on the Panthers. This is hard to pick against an elite level defense like we've seen out of the Colts. I expect this one to be pretty decisive in favor of the Colts. Their offense has been there all season, even with Gardner Minshew in there. Many could argue that Gardner Minshew actually makes their offense better. We've seen Josh Downs continue to emerge, and I think that's a huge step forward for the Colts in terms of developing players. Especially when, you focus on one guy, Michael Pittman Jr., You got to find the 1-2 punch, and Josh Downs stepping up and being that 1-2 punch is huge. Alec Pierce is kind of slotting in behind him. That's going to go a long way. Feel like the pace that the Colts put up offensively is going to be too much for the Carolina Panthers to cover. Going to be interesting to see. I want to see how much of the Panthers offense is centered around finding other people than Adam Thielen to throw the ball to. That's what I want to see because we've yet to see that. So, next up, the Giants take on the Raiders. This could be the quote-unquote dead cat bounce, if you will, with the Raiders having a new head coach. I feel like this is, we just saw the Giants come off a really, really high-level performance in terms of defensive presence up front versus a Jets offense that's not necessarily all that good. But the Giants defense has played really good throughout the season. The Raiders have been constantly deteriorating at multiple positions throughout the course of the year. They've forgotten that they have literally the potential number one wide receiver in the NFL if you just throw him the fucking ball on a general basis. And they're starting a rookie quarterback. I'm going to go with the Giants, even if they end up starting your boy DeVito. So, yeah, I'll take the Giants in that one. Kevin Kugler's on that call. Mark Sanchez, who actually is like Tony Romo light, which is actually the right amount of Tony Romo. By the way, Romo Damas reappeared. He had one play that he predicted correctly, that he predicted in general, because a lot of people didn't like the fact that he was throwing out predictions on the broadcast. A lot of haters, I'll say that. The Cowboys and the Eagles play each other. Don't know if you guys heard this or not. Kind of a big deal. Two of the better teams in the NFL playing each other. Two of the better teams in the NFC. Potential preview for another playoff game. Don't know which situation is going to be going on. Yeah, man, I'm not falling for this shit. I'm taking the Eagles on this. I understand pass rush is real important when it comes to them. Too bad the Eagles got pretty much every possible way to win a football game they got at their disposal with the kind of quarterback they have, with the wide receivers they have, with the kind of defense they have. This is going to come down to can Dak Prescott keep up in a shootout with the Eagles? That's what this is about. That's the fun part about it, because I can already see Monday when them having this conversation about whether or not Dak Prescott is going to have the ability to do it when it counts in the playoffs. This is a playoff-like atmosphere. Everybody's favorite phrase. Sunday Night Football should be fun, too. Bills, Bengals. Bengals for the win. Pretty easy for me. The Bengals have been playing shutout defense. They have been on a meteoric rise. Now that Joe Burrow's calf is 100% healed, he's got some more spring in his throw, got some more spring in his step. He's able to move the ball up and down the field. When they played against the 49ers, who have a significantly better pass rush than what the Buffalo Bills are bringing to the situation, they were able to work around what the hurdles that the 49ers presented to them. And I'm banking on the Bills to continue. Like, the Bills are still trying to figure out what their cap is. Like, what's their highest high? They have not actually. There's been very few games this season where you feel like the Bills have played at 100%. of what this version of their team is. And it's because, and let's be real, it's because their team is changing week to week, just like every other team in the NFL is changing week to week, but theirs seems to be changing more drastically because they're losing starters overall, and key starters at that. So I'll take the Bengals just off the fact that I believe the pass rush is going to be insane in this game for the Bengals up front. Chargers are taking on the Jets. I think we all know who I'm picking in this one. Big Chargers fan. Don't know if you guys know that. Like the way the Chargers play football, except the times when they forget to continue to play football all the way through the end of the game. So this should be pretty fun. This is going to be one of those games where Justin Herbert's probably going to look pretty bad because the pass rush for the Jets is elite, quite possibly number 2 in the NFL. Speaking of pass rush, still waiting to see what we saw from the Chargers up front in terms of rushing the passer when they played against Vegas. And I think it says a lot where it's like, oh man, they dominated against Vegas. You know what I mean? It says a lot. Chargers up front. This game is going to come down to how much time the defense can buy for the Chargers to be able to get their offense together. I think the Jets going to keep doing their thing. Quincy Williams is going to Quincy Williams versus Austin Eckler is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Quincy seems like he runs like a maniac. That's fun for everybody. And that's all I got. That's all I got for you, ladies and gentlemen. Go back and look at those picks. I didn't even sniffle that much into the microphone today. Aren't you proud of me? Anyway, that's my 3rd podcast today, and I'm done. And I'm out. Make sure you wash your hands, wash your ass. Tell the people in your life that you love them. Do good. And most importantly, go home, Roger.